I don't know how many people are listening to me, but I feel like God has put a mission on my heart. And like I said, there's a series of events that happen, but up to get to this point where I'm like, we need to call people to a higher form of action here. Yeah. And so on the 4th of July 2016, I again sit in my this time I was sitting in my truck, in my pickup.
Well, welcome back to the Cory Lee Show, guys. I got an episode today that I know is going to encourage you, that's going to inspire you. I've got a new friend, Yvonne, and Yvonne, I was going to attempt your last name, but you know what? You said I would owe you lunch, and I'm good with that. But I really don't want to butcher your last name. Can you share your last name for us?
Yvonne Mawarire. Mawarire. Yes. There you go.
Powerful. You know what? That's a powerful name, Yvonne. That's a powerful name.
Thank you.
And guys, I just want to share a little bit of his bio here to kind of set the tone for where we're going to go in this episode. It's going to be a really powerful episode. But Yvonne, he is a speaker, he's an author, he's a movement builder. He is a pastor from Zimbabwe. He is a speaker, a global advocate for human rights and democracy. And in 2016, his heartfelt call for justice sparked the This Flag movement. It inspired millions to take a stand against corruption and injustice in Zimbabwe. His courageous leadership, it led to multiple arrests. He got treason charges, but his unwavering commitment to nonviolent activism made him an international symbol of resilience and change. And it's interesting, too, he's a recipient of numerous global honors, including recognized as one of Foreign Policy Magazine's top 100 global thinkers. Let's go. Yvonne has held fellowships at Stanford, Yale, and Johns Hopkins University. He's also got a book, Crazy Epic Courage, and that talks about his journey from faith, being a faith leader, to a political prisoner, and offering powerful lessons on courage and leadership. And so, Yvonne, welcome to the Cory Lee Show.
Cory, my brother, thank you so much for having me, man. Cory, I've got to tell you something. You are probably just about the happiest person I know, even though I've just spoken to you for a couple of minutes. The whole time, dude, you have an infectious smile. There's just an infectious kind of a good feeling about what you're doing. So thank you for bringing the wonderful spirit into my life.
Oh, thank you. My daughter, she gets mad at me sometimes. She said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "Don't take my joy from me. That's just what I do." So anyway, welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, my brother.
Yeah. Well, I shared a little bit about your bio and your story, and man, I would love for you just to take us on that journey. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? And man, you can take us on that journey wherever you want to begin at.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, Cory. My story is one of those stories that even for me was completely unexpected. And I feel like that's something that is a theme of many people that kind of have a kind of a collision with God's mission, right? Mm-hmm. You weren't expecting it, but it kind of lights up everything in your life. So I was pastoring a small church in Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. And I had been doing so for about 8 years. And that was in 2016, where this part of my story begins. I mean, there's many parts to this story, but this part of my story begins in 2016. And I'm pastoring this small church in Harare, Zimbabwe. And our nation, Zimbabwe, at this point, Cory, has been through a lot of stuff. Zimbabwe became an independent country from British colonial rule in 1980. And since 1980 all the way up to 2016, when I then began my journey, there'd only been one man who had been president, and he had stayed in office. It had been 36 years. He had refused to leave office. In fact, at one point, he actually lost the election and just simply refused to step down. He just stayed. But unleashed violence, Cory, that is heartbreaking. Many people were killed. Thousands were killed in the early 80s because he was afraid that they would vote against him. And that theme of political violence and brutality continued through the 80s, through the 90s, and into the 2000s. But one of the things that it also led to was an economic crash. And in 2008 in particular, the economic crash we had in Zimbabwe led us to a point where our inflation was running at 200, and this is a conservative estimate. It was running at 286 million%. Exactly, right? Let me, and it's so difficult to wrap your mind around 286 million. What does it even look like? Well, here's part of what it looked like, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see on this video, and I'll say it out loud as well. But this here was the largest banknote we had. This is a $100 trillion note, right? $100 trillion. That's how many zeros? That's 3, 6, 9, 12, 14 zeros. That's 14 zeros on one banknote. But let me also give you a further understanding of what that meant. Because again, I've given you an inflation rate that's just crazy. I've given you a banknote that's crazy. How much was that worth? What could that buy, right? This at the height of inflation could buy 2 loaves of bread.
Wow.
2 loaves of bread. But it gets worse. It gets worse, Cory. I remember a day in 2008 when I went to find bread, because when you're in a hyperinflation environment, all foodstuffs go missing from the shelves of supermarkets. So supermarkets are empty. There's nothing on the shelves, because what's happening is that everyone is buying whatever they can find, because you're trying to store the value of your money. Right? You don't want that to lose value. So there's nothing in the supermarkets, but this one bakery is baking bread on a particular day. And I get a message in one of the groups I'm in, because again, if you're in a hyperinflationary environment and there's no food around, you find yourselves in these groups, whether it's WhatsApp groups or Signal groups or text message groups, where people are telling each other where a particular commodity is. So it could be bread, it could be gas, it could be cooking oil, it could be eggs. Wherever they appear, if you're in a group where, someone knows, they tell you, hey, there's eggs at the corner of 5th and 4th Avenue, it's just arrived, and everybody just, rushes there. So I get a message that there's bread available. I've got $100 trillion and I'm going to get 2 loaves of bread. But I get there and the line is already long, and I have to wait 2 hours before it's my turn to buy bread, because they're selling by the batch. And by the time it's my turn to buy bread, my $100 trillion note, which could get me 2 loaves of bread, can now only get me half a loaf of bread.
Wow.
The price was going up whilst I was in the line. So this is how bad it had gotten in 2008. And I could tell you countless stories of how bad it had gotten in Zimbabwe. But we come to the end of 2008 and we get to 2009, and Zimbabwe eventually has to scrap the entire currency because it's just not working. It's no longer worth the money, the paper is printed on. In fact, it's now costing the government more to print a 100. It's costing them, say, for example, $200 trillion to print a $100 trillion note, and yet they would still print it, right? So they eventually scrap it, and we move to US dollars. And that's what we're trading on. 2016 now is when I am a pastor for a small church, and I also have a family. But we start to go through the same cycle where the government says that they're going to be introducing another currency. And this would be kind of the third currency we've had over the years, and each one has failed. And so I'm sitting there. Our church at the time was looking after an orphanage down the road. We were helping families within our church. But more than that, I was starting to fail to put food on the table for my family. And that was concerning, Cory, that if I'm failing to put food on the table for my family, what about the orphanage that we help? How about the other families that we help? What's happening with them? And our church is a small church, right? This is like 40 people in a church. And I often laugh about the size of the church that I was counting my 2 kids and my wife and our unborn child as part of the church. But I'm sitting in my church office, and suddenly I get this sense that this is not right.
Hmm.
Like, we can't allow this to happen and nobody says anything. Like, I know that some politicians have said something, but it hasn't really amounted to anything. But we, the people, and especially the believers, when are we going to say something? And so I sit in my small church office, filled with both rage, frustration, and fear, and I pull up my phone. I prop it up against my Bible. I still have my old worn Bible. I call it my war Bible. It's torn and tattered, but that Bible has been with me through a lot of stuff, some of which I'll talk about. And I pull up my phone and I lean it up against my Bible because I didn't have a stand or anything. So I put it up against my Bible and I record this 4-minute video. And it was a 4-minute video that I recorded without a script, and I just spoke from the heart. And I said to whoever was going to be watching, you and I have to find the courage to stand up to injustice, to stand up to brutality. And in particular, those of us who are believers, this is the time for us to stand up and say there is a moral. We have the moral authority or the moral right to call the unjust to order. Like, this is not right for you to take advantage of the weakest and the poorest. And so I put this video together, and it was a 4-minute video. There was nothing else added to it except me just having this rant. And at the end of it, I'm saying we have to pray for Zimbabwe. We have to do something. We have to show up. I don't know what it is, but we're going to have to figure this out. Yeah. And I put this video out on Facebook, and not really expecting anything would come out of it, because my church of 40 people, my views, I laugh about it now and say, I used to get, I don't know, every video I put out for discipleship class, I would get 35 views in 6 months. Right. Yeah. And when you have one extra view, you're like, oh, we've got 36 views. 36. Yeah. And I put this video out, Cory, and this thing just exploded.
Wow.
It exploded, and it overnight. I put it up just before I went to bed, and when I woke up in the morning, somebody called me from our church and said, Pastor, I've seen your video. It's gone nuts. You got to have a look at it. And it had like 250,000 views.
Wow.
It was wild. But this video then opened up a journey. As scared as I was, as scared as my family and my church members were at what I had just done, I felt like there was something in there that God was calling us to do. Mm-hmm. And I remember praying about this. There's a little garden I used to go to. There's a counseling center in Harare that has a little garden at the back. And I used to go to this counseling center, and I would ask them if I could use their garden just to spend some time in prayer. And I remember being in that garden, just thinking, especially after this video had gone out on that particular, I was praying. I was like, Lord, what is this about? And he took me to Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 8. And that became the anchor scripture for the rest of the story that I will get a chance to tell you. And I've got my Bible here with me. I love holding still the printed Bible. I know we all use digital ones these days, but the printed one, I love it. And Proverbs chapter 31 verse 8 says this in the NIV. It says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. And I remember thinking, Lord, I don't even know, like, I understand what the scripture is saying, but I don't even know how that's going to work. Like, I thought we were doing it already for the orphanage, but I felt like this was a call to action in a bigger way. And from that moment on, Cory, something began to unfold in my heart, which was a sense of challenging the highest office in the land to fix our country, to be more accountable, to be more compassionate. And so it led us on a journey, and I began recording videos. Almost every day I would put a video out that I would talk about. This is why you and I need to speak up. This is why you and I need to stand up. And at the end of every video, I would always call people to pray and say, hey, I'm going to ask you to pray for our country, Zimbabwe, and ask that God that God would bring us breakthrough. So that's the beginnings, of this story and of this journey. And I would not have guessed the kind of journey that it took me on. But within a couple of months, I would say, after I had started doing these videos, I started in April of 2016. By July of 2016, the government was still pushing ahead with introducing this new currency that they were talking about. And I knew that people were going to lose everything. We would lose it all, just like we lost it all in 2008. We knew this. My parents, when they had retired in 2008, they had about 60, maybe about, no, my parents had about $80,000, okay, of retirement in their savings, 80,000 US dollars. In 7 days, in a period of 7 days, the government banned anybody from withdrawing money from the banks because they were trying to stop a run on the banks. And they banned all withdrawals. In 7 days, they went from having 80,000 US dollars as retirement, which is a lot of money to retire on in Zimbabwe. And they went from having that to having 25 cents.
Wow. Wow.
25 cents. So the trauma was deep for a lot of people. And so, they were not listening to anybody who was saying, please don't introduce the new currency, or please, let's take care of the corruption. Let's take care of the mismanagement first before we do that. And so my decision became, we have to call our country to action. I don't know how many people are listening to me, but I feel like God has put a mission on my heart. And like I said, there's a series of events that happen, but up to get to this point where I'm like, we need to call people to a higher form of action here.
Yeah.
And so on the 4th of July, 2016, I again sit in my well, this time I was sitting in my truck, in my pickup truck. I had an old 1998 beat up Nissan diesel truck. I love my trucks, by the way. And I'm sitting in this truck, and I make this video, and I say to Zimbabweans, I'm going to ask you to do something, to take one day off work where we can protest. Now, in Zimbabwe, it's illegal to protest on the street. You cannot protest the government without permission from the government.
Interesting.
So that was never going to happen. And besides, I was never going to call people on the streets anyway, because it was just too dangerous. People were too scared. And so what I sensed to do instead was to reverse that. And I said, I don't know how many people are listening. There's about maybe 50 million people in Zimbabwe. So I'm asking you to take one day off work. This was the 4th of July, 2016. I'm asking you to take one day off work on the 6th of July. So the video goes up on the 4th of July. And I'm saying on the 6th of July, which is the middle of the week, I'm asking you to take one day off work, to not go to work, to not take your kids to school, to not open your businesses, to not go shopping, to not go to the bank, to not even go on the street. Stay at home. And let's shut this whole country down. Let's bring it to a complete standstill.
Ooh, wow.
And that will be our protest. And here's the thing, Cory, is, it's one thing for someone who is pastoring a church of thousands to call for something like that. And it's another thing for someone who's pastoring a church that struggles to have 40 people in attendance. And even if there are 40 people in total, everyone doesn't show up to church every week. People show up to church in cycles, of kind of 2 weeks. And
Yvonne, I want to ask you something real quick, because I really want to hear how the rest of the story goes. But I really want to hear, as you're thinking about all of this, as you're praying and you're sitting with the Lord on all of this, how did that idea come to you, to like, hey, let's shut it down this way? Like, I guess what I really want to know is, like, your quiet moments with the Lord, how do you feel like he was shaping your thoughts and your ideas and the courage in those moments? What was that like for you?
I think one of the most interesting things that I sensed when I was making the decision for this call to action was what action that is perceived as the weakest could end up being the strongest.
Yeah.
So what action can people, what action, it's almost like I felt God saying, I'm gonna cause you to use the most illogical, unexpected ways to show a level of, I guess, influence or a level of power that you couldn't, you can't correlate the absence of people from the streets with a show of strength, yet
Yeah.
you can, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I couldn't see it even at the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
seriously, like when I eventually made the call, I remember sitting with my friends. A few of my friends would come to join me when I made the call to action. And when I made the decision, I said, guys, I think we should shut the country down. And the three of us, my two friends who were with me in the office, they both looked at me and they're like, what are you talking about? I said, let's just bring the whole thing to a standstill.
Mm.
And they're like, that's impossible. How could you even do that? Now, it had happened before in Zimbabwe, years before. The trade unions had actually done something like that. It was called a stay away, where they just asked people to stay at home as a form of protest. But the trade unions are a very powerful movement. And I actually talk about it in my book, which you were talking about earlier, which is right here, Crazy Epic Courage, how a nobody challenged brutal dictators to move and moved a nation. And I said to them, I'm not really sure how this is going to work, but I feel like for people who are scared, like this would be the easiest thing to do.
Hey guys, I hope you are enjoying this episode of the Cory Lee Show. Y'all, I am on a mission to build leaders and to transform culture. So if you're looking for a speaker who speaks directly to the heart, a mentor to come alongside you and your team, or if you're in a position where you're looking for a personal coach who embraces where you are and also believes in who you could become, then I would be honored to walk this path with you. Simply reach out to me on my email at cory@coryleeleadership.com. Look, let's make your vision a reality. Contact me and together we'll navigate the path from aspiration to achievement. Your transformation, it starts now.
Right? But I also feel like once as a scared person, you're able to do something, even something small, your courage grows just that much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So so for me, the logic was almost kind of like, and I find this theme, Cory, of not only even in my life, even when I look through the Bible, this theme of how God kind of uses these things that are just for human logic, they're like, they don't correlate. How do you use, for example, with Gideon? Right? Instead of saying, right, let's get you more people to go and fight, God keeps taking them away. He keeps removing them and until there's a smaller number. I mean, it's scary. It's almost like, wait, that's not how you fight a battle, right? To fight a battle, you need more people, you need more soldiers, because that makes sense. And I remember thinking to myself, this is gonna be the dumbest thing that I ever do, and everyone's gonna call me dumb for it. This is gonna be crazy. Yeah. And I remember when I made the call, I mean, the phone calls came in from people that were in opposition political parties, people who were in civic society organizations, and they said, dude, you are way in over your head. Like, this is first of all, you've just destroyed whatever, credibility you've had for the last couple of months since you started calling the government to accountability. And secondly, people will not, like, you're not going to bring any change with that. It's never going to happen. And it was a hard moment.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I really want to ask that is because when I hear that, I immediately think of, and especially going into Gideon and all, in First Corinthians chapter 2, it talks about that we have the mind of Christ, right? Like
Hmm.
I can think with human intellect, I can think with human wisdom and all of that. And human wisdom says, let's go protest on the streets. But you're like, that's not going to work. That's definitely not going to work. And so I can think from that perspective, or I can tap into the mind of Christ. And I'm just laughing because typically that makes no logical sense.
No, it makes no sense. It makes Corey, you get to a Red Sea, and and everyone says, okay, Corey, what are we gonna do? And you're like, okay, here's what's gonna happen is we're gonna part the sea, and we're gonna walk on dry. It's almost like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
why did we follow this guy? Like, what
yeah.
are we even doing here?
Is there somebody else we can talk to?
No, I know, right? And that those are the moments I was going through, those exact words you're talking about, where people are like, is there like, okay, we thought this guy was onto something, but he's like one of these crazy pastors. So we've wasted 3 months following a complete idiot
Yeah,
because now he's asking us to stay at home as a protest. Like who does like a protest? You show up,
yeah,
right? You don't show up. A protest, by virtue of it being effective, you've got to be present. You've got to register a presence, right?
yeah.
And so I make this call to action, Corey, and it once we make the call to action, first of all, we're in a position where if it does not work, then this whole thing I've been doing comes to an end,
Mm.
right? It comes to an end because now you've proved that you actually don't have the kind of influence that supposedly you have, or supposedly the engagement on social media has been saying you have. You don't. No one's listening. No one cares. Nobody wants to do it. So you don't have the influence. So that, number one, it would come to an end. Whatever the campaigns were we were thinking of doing, or whatever mission I felt God had sent me on, that was coming to an end if this didn't work. That was problem number one. Problem number two, which was more concerning, was that if the government did not consider me a threat, or if the government wasn't coming after me, now they would have a great opportunity to come after me,
Mm.
right? It's
Yeah.
the whole thing you're trying to do has failed, and now we can deal with you in front of everyone. And this is something that they did regularly.
Wow.
If you dissented against the government, they came after you as an individual and made an example. 1 year before I started speaking out, exactly 1 year, in March of 2015, there was a young journalist. His name is Itai Zamara, and I always mention Itai's name to honor him because of his bravery and courage. Itai would stand in the town square by himself with a big sign that said, "Failed Robert Mugabe must go." One
Mm.
man, he would do that. And one day after his one man protest, he took off to go home. And whilst he was in a barber shop in his neighborhood getting a haircut, he was snatched from that barber shop by four men. They bundled him into a pickup truck and drove away. Itai has not been heard from or seen again since 2015. He left his wife and two children.
Wow.
So the repercussions were great. But and so because of that fear, I go into hiding, immediately go into hiding. And I'm in hiding for the 2 days leading up to the day that I'd called the shutdown. And on the 6th of July 2016, a day that I will never forget, Corey, the entire country of Zimbabwe came to a complete standstill.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask you, how many actually, like, how many people stayed home? Like,
We've estimated that it was between 9 and 12 million people that stayed at home.
wow. Wow.
Like I know this for a fact because the cities were shut down. There was no one on the streets. There was no, the banks were closed. The supermarket, everything was closed. Nobody. It was that profound. In fact, we were so I was excited. I wanted to see it. So from the safe house we were in with some friends of mine, we drove out in a little unmarked car, probably one of the most dangerous things we could have done because I'm quite sure surveillance was everywhere trying to figure out what was going on. But we drove around and I took video footage of the shutdown city of Harare.
Wow. Wow.
So so instantly, the thing I feared the most actually then also became, remember I was saying that if it didn't work, they would come after us. But guess what? If it did work, they would come after us still. In
Yeah.
fact, now they would have even more reason to come after us. And so I was hugely excited, but I was deeply, deeply, deeply terrified at the same time. And so now here we are sitting with what has now become a citizens movement. And with the success of this shutdown, it has now become probably the most recognized voice that is speaking truth to power. And for a moment, I'm thinking to myself, whilst this is exciting, I actually don't know what to do next. Right? Like I said, Cory, I said yes. And this is the reason I call this crazy epic courage. I said yes without having the full plan. Because God doesn't always give you the full plan when he calls you to attempt a mission that is bigger than you. And that's a talk I give in a lot of places. Saying yes to God's mission that is bigger than me. You don't always get the full plan, but God does require you to say yes. At the beginning, you can ask Jonah when we finally get to eternity one day, if we get a chance, if we live in the same neighborhood, right? you can ask even the disciples. What he requires is for you to say yes. Because, and this is what I discovered months later. I didn't discover it straight away. I want to be clear as well, Cory. I didn't understand everything. I wasn't always God's best kid on this mission. Sometimes I was frustrated. Sometimes I was hard-headed. Sometimes I said no. Sometimes I wanted to do it my own way and found out the hard way that it didn't work. And then just like a kid, I was just excited to see God do amazing things. And then him be like, okay, this is what I was trying to do the whole time. So let's go now to the next level, right?
Yeah.
And so here I am now sitting with this movement that's come alive. I don't know what to do next, but what I do know now is that the government is looking for me, and now the word is out that the police are looking for me, and I'm in hiding, and a really scary thing happens where they show up at my house where my wife and my children are, the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old, and she was pregnant with our third one.
Wow.
Which, again, I kind of laugh about it. It's not a laughing matter, but I kind of laugh about it and say, a 5-year-old and 3-year-old and a pregnant wife are kind of like the international symbol for starting trouble with a dictator. That's when you do it, right? When you have a family like that, and that's when you start trouble with a dictator. And the reason I kind of say that, even in a joking manner, is to try and communicate that there's never a right time. There's never the time where you're like, okay, now I'm ready. Let's do it. It's always going to come when you are most vulnerable, when you are most under-resourced, when it doesn't make sense. Because remember, with God, you're not operating on your schedule. You're operating on His schedule.
Yeah.
Right. And so they come to the house and they threaten my wife and my kids, and they say, if your husband does not come out, then something will happen to you guys. So I get that message, and immediately I'm like, nope, I'm not going to allow that to happen. And so I give myself up, and I'm immediately arrested. I was arrested on I think it was must have been July 12 of 2016, and I'm charged with treason.
I want to go something into that decision right there. All right. So you get the word that your family's been threatened unless you come out. Was there prayer of like, Lord, what do I do here? Or you just like, I know that if I go this way, Lord, you're going to take care. Like, how is that decision made? Because I don't want to bypass that. That's a big decision. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah. It's a big decision. I don't want to say that I was clear-minded about, right, if I go this way, the Lord's going to be. No, for me at that point, it was a knee-jerk reaction. My family's in trouble.
Yeah.
And And the one thing that I value as mission number one for me is my family. That's mission number one, which, by the way, is where this whole journey had started. Me recording that video was based on the fact that I was starting to fail to provide for my family.
Yeah.
And then the larger mission became, hey, we have an orphanage down the road. Hey, we have families in our church. Hey, wait, we have struggling people in this whole country. So mission number one for me was kind of, I was like, God, if there's one thing that you've called me to do, if I succeeded nothing else, you've called me to make sure that I stand for my family. So that's where that came from. And I knew that if I did that, if I stand up to defend my family, or if I rush to the defense of my family, God would take care of the rest. That's mission number one.
Yeah.
He'll take care of, I don't know how he'll do it. But if I make sure, if I take care of that, he's going to take care of the rest.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the peace was for me. Right? Because there was a moment in which there was panic, and then there was a moment in which I was like, no, wait. All I need to know is that they're safe. If I know that they're safe, I'm good.
Yeah.
I can face everything that comes after this. Whatever comes, I'll be able to, whatever pain comes, I'll be able to face it, knowing that these guys are safe, that this is taken care of.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's how that kind of rolled out. You know, in the book I talk about something I had to do before that arrest, which was a very difficult thing for me to do. One of my friends who was with me said to me, listen, dude, we know that you can't run forever. You can't hide forever. They're going to get you one way or the other, right? And then he said to me, so I'm going to ask you to do something, which is to record a video that you almost prepare people for what to do next should you either be arrested, or should you be abducted and never be seen again, or should you be found dead somewhere. It was a hard thing, a very hard thing. I mean, even him telling me was a difficult moment to say, hey, listen, this is what we should do. Essentially, he was asking me to almost record my own death note, my own, kind of note before, that people would get to hear after the fact. And I remember being so terrified doing that, because for the first time I was coming face to face with the possibility that, wait, I could die. Like I could die doing this. What am I doing? Oh my gosh. Right. And it was a profound moment in that, again, part of what I've kind of always said to people is, if you're going to attempt to do what God has called you to do, if you're going to say yes to God's call on your life, one of the things that you have to deal with is the fear of death. The fear of death. Jesus died on the cross, and he took away the sting of death. He's like, you don't have to be afraid of death anymore. Like, whilst it will come, like it will come one way or the other. If Jesus tarries, we're all going to meet our death, right? But whilst he tarries, should death knock on your door, he says, I want you to never be afraid of death. So I end up in a maximum security prison because once I hand myself in, and I face two of the hardest nights of my entire life. I'm beaten and I'm tortured for 2 nights in that prison. But the miracle comes in the morning, Cory. This is where the breakthrough comes, the sweetness. You know, when the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. This is it. This right here, my friend, is it. I wake up in the morning. We're about to go to court for the beginning of my trial, starting off with a bail hearing where I'll be tried from home or I have to be held in detention. And the one police officer comes to my cell and says to me, hey, Pastor, and I loved it because they call me Pastor. He said, hey, Pastor, we're gonna help we're gonna hold, and that's another story of making friends with people who had been asked to come and arrest me, because I was arrested another 8 times over the next 3 years after this.
Wow.
And I had profound moments with people who were sent to arrest me.
Wow.
And he says to me, Pastor, there's about 200 people gathered at the courts. We're gonna delay going and send a riot squad to clear them out, and then we'll go to court because we don't want a situation. So we wait an hour. He comes back. He says, "Hey man, there's 500 people now. So we're sending a riot unit, a bigger riot unit." He comes back an hour later. Says, "Hey man, there's 2,000 people." He comes
Wow.
back, man, there's 3,000 people. Can I tell you, almost 6, maybe 7 hours later, he comes back and there's 10,000 people gathered at the courts. And it's
Wow.
actually now nighttime. The courts are closed at this point. And these people are there with their flags. They're singing worship songs. I have pictures of all of this that I can send you.
Wow.
They're singing worship songs. They have candles, and they've decided that we're not leaving until you let him go.
Wow.
I wept, Cory. I wept tears because the 2 nights I had spent, I was in that prison crying, asking God, why have you abandoned me? Where are
Mm.
you? Why is my family in danger? Because the people who tortured me were threatening my family. Whilst they were torturing me, they were telling me, what if something happens to your family because of what you're doing? And this moment comes through, and God says to me, Ivan, it was never about you.
Mm.
It was
Wow.
not about you. I've got you. I've got you. This was not about you. And so the story continues from there, Cory. And because of those people, I end up being released actually that night.
Wow.
An incredible, I mean, it's words do not do it justice to explain what happened. I tried to write about it in the book, and hopefully those who do get a chance to read will get a sense of it. But I end up leaving, and they end up deciding that they're going to rearrest me in the morning because the government felt they'd been embarrassed, and they were coming for me in the morning, early in the morning. But a police chaplain gets the message to me. Dude, it sounds like a whole movie. A police chaplain gets a hold of me through one of my friends and says, "Hey, he's getting rearrested in the morning. You guys need to do something about that, unless he wants to face the arrest." My wife packs a backpack for me immediately when she hears it, gives me my passport, and she says, "You need to leave. I don't know how you need to do it, but get out. Me and the kids will be safe." And I'm like, "Yo, I can't leave you." She's like, "Go. You need to go." And so I'm driven 6 hours across the border to a small border, and I managed to escape from Zimbabwe, dramatic escape through the border. And after a few days, I'm able to rendezvous with my family, and I get my family out, my wife and my kids, and we rendezvous in another country, in South Africa, actually. And then through a series of events, we find ourselves in the US. We get here, and 2 months after we arrive, my daughter is born.
Wow.
I mean, just such an amazing gift of God. And once she is born, I hold her for 2 months, Cory, and the Lord says to me, "Ivan, it's not over. You need to go back."
Oh, wow. Wow.
Exactly. So I end up going back to Zimbabwe, one of the hardest choices I ever made. Um, and and thank God for my wife. She just an amazing woman. She didn't want me to go back, obviously, like anyone who's got their mind on straight, right? But I end up going back to Zimbabwe. I leave my family in the US, and I land back in Zimbabwe, and I'm arrested immediately on arrival at the airport. And that begins
Yvonne.
another part of that story. So we can talk
Yvonne.
about that another time.
We're going to call this part one, okay? Because we've got too much to talk about, and I know we're right at time. And so we're going to do a part two, if you're good with that. We're going to do a part
I'm
two.
I'm good. I'm good with it. I'm good with it.
Because
I'm happy to do a part two.
there's so much to your story that I think would be so encouraging to people. And so we
Mm,
are going to do a part two. I know we're right at time, but I have one last question for you
hmm
that I really want to like. I heard one of your other videos, and you were talking about what courage is, and you define courage. And I love that.
hmm
I'd love for you just to maybe there's there's somebody that they know that they are called to do something, but maybe fear has kind of gripped them. Any words of encouragement that you may have for them?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, that definition of courage is that courage is the decision to act for the things you care about the most. Right? So if you can decide, if you can get to the point of say, and by the way, here's another thing. Because when people hear my story, Cory, they always say, I don't have as much courage as you do. That's not true. That's not true. Courage is not measured by the danger we face, but by the actions we take.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you get up every morning and you go to a job that's hurtful, that's painful to go to, but the reason you do it is because you want to take care of your family, that's courage, my friend. That's courage right there. So just to let people know that your decision to act for the things you care about the most, or your decision to act for the things that God cares about the most, that is courage. The ability to stand up and say, even if it pains me, even if it shames me, and even if it brings me to a place where I'm ridiculed, the fact that I did this small action for it, the small decision to do something for it, proves that I have courage, and that's all that matters, nothing else.
Wow, that's so good. So, Yvonne, man, you've added. I almost feel like we're watching one of those Netflix shows that keeps you on the cliffhanger, right? And so that means you guys have to come back and listen to part two, right? And so
part two is wild.
Oh, well, good. I'm looking forward to part two. And so I'm just sitting here, just amazed, and just man, I just want to say thank you for your obedience.
Thank you.
You know, it'd be easy to say thank you for your courage too, 100%, but your obedience, right, to the voice of the Lord, and how that has been so freeing to a lot of people. And so I just want to say thank you for coming on. I'm going to have in the show notes below ways to get in touch with Yvonne, links to his book, all those kind of things. Make sure you support him, encourage him, and continue to pray for him as well. And so, Yvonne, I just want to say thank you for coming on the Cory Lee Show today, buddy.
Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yes, sir. Bless you. I hope you have an awesome day. Thank you guys for taking a listen to the Cory Lee Show. I know this has added value to you, but make sure you like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with any of the latest episodes of the Cory Lee Show. You guys have a great day, and God bless. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Thanks for joining me today. I hope I have added value to you. And if you have found value in this episode, let me know. Drop a comment and make sure you share with a friend or family member. See you next episode.